The beginning of Turkic history is usually accounted to the Gökturks, and even though Turkic people left heavy marks in Eurasian history, the Gökturks are usually overshadowed by more recent Turkic empires and khaganates. It is to the point that the Ashina clan is generally speaking forgotten, when it used to be a name every Turk used to know. This may all sound very figuratively, but the Gökturks are a topic that is hardly covered in literature. Very little is addressed and can actually be found, but there is at least one book dedicated to the entire topic, and that is The Gokturks, Origin, Religion and Rapid Rise of the First Turkic Empire by Emre-E Yavuz, also known as The Khan's Den on YouTube. Now before I start with the video, I would like to mention that the book has some glaring issues which I will address in the pinned comment, simply because they are easily fixed and don't deserve to be explicitly mentioned in the video. I will also focus mainly on the political aspect of the book, but the book covers much more. That being said, when does Turkic history begin? Although the Gokturks are attributed to be the beginning of recorded Turkic history, as they were the first to be recorded as a nation of Turks, the Gokturks are more akin to the formation of the conscious Turkic identity than the beginning of Turkic history. Since there is a lack of sources, there are various theories to when Turkic history begins. As an example, the Huns were most certainly at least partially Turkic, since the Huns disappeared geographically where the Turks literally appeared. The rise of the Gokturks was also accompanied with large amount of tribes bending the knee to the new Turkish Khaganate, which likely implies that the region of Central Asia was at least partially inhabited by Turkic people prior to even the emergence of the Gokturks. In antiquity, the Roman geographer Pomponius Mela mentioned in the 1st century of the region he called Turkия in Ukraine around the Sea of Azov, on which the quote-unquote Turks were living. We know for a fact that centuries later Turkic people most definitely inhabited this area, so it is possible that Turkic people inhabited and interacted with the Romans of antiquity centuries prior to the emergence of the Gokturks. It is of course possible that the Roman geographer was talking about some completely unrelated people that just happened to be called Turks as well, but this doesn't automatically translate to the possibility that it was impossible for Turks to appear in Europe prior to the Gokturks. We at least know of the Saragurs and the Onogurs that were granted land in Ukraine in the 5th century, both of which were Turkic speakers of the Oghur branch. The Turkanian or Togorma were also mentioned in antiquity by a variety of historic figures and scholars. Joseph ben Aaron, the Khazarian Khagan, claimed in 960 that Turks were descendants of the Togorma. This could obviously be nonsense, but it is curious to why a Khagan would claim it if there was no ground for it. If you turn time far back enough, you can trace the roots of Turkic people to the Xiongnu Federation, which likely was at least partially Turkic. However, after the Chinese defeated them, they disintegrated and migrated to different regions. We also know of the Sabirs, Kutigurs and the Utigurs, which were all at least partially Turkic. So Eurasia, particularly between Mongolia and Ukraine, was at least partially vividly inhabited by Turkic people. Whether they all viewed themselves as one people or tribe is a mystery of its own, but they likely didn't call themselves Turks, since the Ashina tribe, the ruling dynasty of the Gokturks, was initially referred to be quote-unquote Turk. So who were the Gokturks and how did they carve their empire out? You might have guessed it already, the Gokturks were, like other Turkic people, nomadic people, living in yurts and being accustomed to riding horses and hunting with bows. However, the course of history brought them to the Altai Mountains, where they operated as blacksmiths for the Ruran, their overlords of unknown origin. It could be that the Ruran were Turkic themselves, or maybe they were only partially Turkic or not Turkic at all. Whatever the case was, the Ashina clan, aka the Gokturks, were at first loyal subjects of the Ruran. While they started small, they quickly became a regional blacksmith supplier, in fact among the largest, if not the largest in the region. Coupled with their talented horsemen, their archery skills and the supply of horses, the Ashina clan grew to a size which was even acknowledged by the contemporary Chinese nations. As the power of the Ashina clan grew, their ambitions grew with them. The Ashina clan increased their military capabilities over the decades, likely numbering tens of thousands of soldiers under their banner. Not content with it, they independently established trade relationships with the Chinese kingdom of Western Wei. Perhaps it was the profit that interested the Wei, but perhaps it was also kinship they felt with the Ashina clan. After all, the Tuoba family in China was of Hannic origin, a subgroup of which was ruling the Western Wei. Feeling confident, the contemporary leader of the Ashina clan, Bumin, felt confident enough to intervene in politics, and after crushing several rebellions for their overlords, asked for the hand of the daughter of his lord. The lord, furious of his demand, rejected Bumin's wish. After all, the Turks, so the Ruran, were just slave blacksmiths unworthy of royal blood. To make matters worse, the Ruran refused any reward for Bumin, his subject. A regional powerhouse, he just insulted and took his loyalty for granted. Not content with such disrespect, the Ashina clan prepared for war. When their efforts are not to be acknowledged, then the Turks need not a new lord, but a nation of Turks, by the Turks, for Turks. Luckily for Bumin, the Ashina clan was not the only tribe that was discontent with the Ruran overlordship, and although nothing happened in the first few years, the coalition against the Ruran grew in size. Maybe some of the tribes seeked economic benefits, as the climate was harsh in the years 536 to 545. Maybe it was kinship that made other tribes flock to the side of the Gokturks. But whatever the case was, war followed with a crushing defeat for the Ruran. The Ruran, utterly in shock by their rush defeat, ran wherever they could. Some joined the Chinese nation of Northern Qi, a rival of the Wei. Others ran into the direction of Europe, joining the Avars with 20,000 people. However, the power vacuum that was created was rapidly filled by the new lord of the steppes, the Khagan, the Gökturks. Not through bloody conquest, but by the tribes willingly bending their knee. The Gokturks stretched from Manchuria to Ukraine. Familiar with statehood, the Gokturks soon established trade relationships across their borders. After all, they were practically a state of their own under the Ruran already. Among the first contact were the Koreans, which resulted in cooperations in the fields of economy, military, and politics. To fund and operate this new empire and its army, the Kyrgyz supplied the Ashina clan with gold and iron. However, the Lord of the Steppes could obviously not just sit and do nothing, and soon a Gökturk-Zhao alliance against the Qi was formed and military operations against the Qi conducted. Ultimately, the Zhao-Gökturk war against the Qi failed, but the Gökturks plundered the rich Chinese Taiyuan area and suffered little casualties. But this unfruitful event did not result in a one-time cooperation. Around the 560s, both sides, the Zhao and the Gökturks, decided to deepen their relationship, and thus the daughter of the Khagan became the empress of the Zhao. The years passed, and the steppes and lands under the Gokturks not only saw peace but also prosperity. The Ashina clan sit on the throne of a vast empire, and so faith will, the Gokturks made contact with the Romans around the 570s. The initial contact was quite fruitful, with both sides having mutual understandings of each other. However, the relationship soured over the Avars, which the Romans were accused of protecting. The topic of the Avars was not just a side note for the Gokturks, but a matter of importance. After all, the Ruran, their former oppressors and overlords, were among them. Whatever the reason was, war followed between the Romans and the Gokturks, the first of many that would follow throughout Roman-Turkic interaction and history. They soon invaded the Roman lands and besieged the ancient Greek fortification of Chersonesos, as well as the city of Bosporus. The siege was successful for the Gokturks, which meant the Romans had two options: either continue a total war for the Avars or negotiate a beneficial peace. Thus the Romans seek peace. The peace resulted in the Turks garrisoning Crimea and the Turks returning to the vast steppes. The world was in front of the Gokturks. It looked like they were the playmakers, the decision makers, the one deciding where to go, where to fight, and what to conquer. Who would even threaten them? Who could even threaten them? But as this tale may repeat for many other Khaganates and steppe nations, the Gokturks vanished. Not by external force, not by someone else conquering them, not by catastrophic natural disasters. They imploded. No matter how good you think you rule, there will always be people disagreeing with the new order, and there will be people seeking better economic opportunities. As such, while some Turkic tribes migrated to the Tang for more opportunities, in particular as mercenaries, others seek change in the form of a new leadership in their name. A civil war erupted. The Gokturks split, and as if that wasn't enough, bad harvests led to starvation. But divine retribution did not stop there. The heavens were too small for multiple overlords, and as such, wars followed. Wars conducted by the Chinese, but also by the new emerging powerhouse, the Caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate. The combination of these factors ensured that the Gokturks would, in their disunity, fall apart. Although the nation of the Gokturks ended, their legacy did not. The Ashina clan, even centuries after their fall, were upheld in high regards. Pedigree was cherished among the new Turkic nations, and the highest of pedigrees was a lineage to the Ashina clan. The nation of the Gokturks was no more, but their presence, the Turkic identity they had left behind, would not only be remembered, but would soon kick off several events of Turkic-led or influenced nations carving their marks into history. Before I end the video, I would like to mention 3 more things I didn't see fitting until now. First, this flag of the Gokturks is basically a fake made in the 20th century, since the Gökturks flag is basically unknown. However, the wolf in the flag does have meaning. In the original lore of the Ashina clan, Asena, the she-wolf, took care of an abandoned boy. The boy would later conduct bestiality with the she-wolf and have children, half-wolves, who would bear the name Ashina. Suffice to say, this is nonsense, and the reality is that the Gokturks carried the name Böre, which meant wolves. However, I'm not sure if the wolf as a symbol or as a celestial divine being was upheld in Turkic society. At least there was no such symbolism with the Seljuks, who deeply respected the Ashina lineage. I am inclined to believe that the entire wolf concept is also a 20th century invention. Second, when the Ashina clan arrived in the Altai Mountains, they did not conduct any raids, at least not in China. The first Gökturk raid in China was reported in 542, which is about 100 years after the arrival of the Ashina clan. Last but not least, the mother of a general of the Tang dynasty who instigated a disastrous rebellion against the Tang emperor in the 8th century was a member of the Ashide, the second most powerful clan of the Gokturks, also Turkic in origin. The Ashida were also instrumental in the Ilterish Kagan rebellion against the Chinese. Turks were also regularly used by the Chinese throughout the centuries, though there is Turkic presence in Chinese history and noteworthy as well.